Yeah, 15th in the Premier League table. No Champions League football to come, but Matheus Cunha's already chosen to join them. Brian Mbeumo said he favours a move to Old Trafford over other potential transfers for him. And this morning we found out the breaking news that Bruno Fernandes has rejected what was expected to be £700,000 a week from Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia in favour of staying in Manchester. The former Manchester United goalkeeper Ben Foster joined talkSPORT Breakfast and said Bruno is one of only two players who deserves to stay at Old Trafford.
Genuinely, there's probably two players that I would trust in that Manchester United team, and that would be Bruno and Harry Maguire at centre-back, because even Harry Maguire has been ridiculed.
Very good, he's been.
Yeah. I need honesty. I just need good, solid, hard-working, honest lads, and that's what Man United need to get back to. You see this morning, Alejandro Garnacho has already put a tweet out bemoaning his lucky game time in the final. Straight away, I'm thinking, right, that'll do then, mate. That'll do. I can't have players coming out after a final. We've lost. We're in this together. We're a team. But he makes it all about him, and that's what you need to get away from Manchester United. You need to make it all about the team and not the individuals.
Bruno Fernandes choosing to stay at Old Trafford. Joining us for more on this breaking news then, let's join talkSPORT's transfer correspondent Ben Jacobs. Morning, Ben.
Good morning, Ben.
Morning.
Ben, how big a surprise is this then, that Bruno has walked away from the big bucks to stay at Old Trafford?
Not necessarily a huge surprise, because although there were positive talks last week regarding the financials, Bruno Fernandes always made it clear that he needed some time to deliberate with his family. We've learned in the last 48 hours that this, for Fernandes, would not just be a football or a financial decision. So a little bit like when Lionel Messi said no to Saudi Arabia and went instead to Inter Miami and MLS, that was a family decision too. And I think for Bruno Fernandes, the first consideration was what his wife and family felt about Saudi Arabia. He's only 30. If he waits until after the 2026 World Cup, the offer will likely still be there again, and he will know that. So there's an openness to Saudi Arabia, but there was always a bit of reticence about whether now was the right time in a season leading up to a World Cup. Likely, of course, Fernandes's last World Cup because of his age. And then in addition to that, there's Manchester United's own ambition, which might sound a strange thing to say given no Champions League football and their league position last season. But if you look at this push in the early days of the window, Cunha and Mbeumo, I think Bruno Fernandes would see that ambition, even if those two players are actually, to some extent, competition for where he plays, and maybe feel that this is the first window that Ruben Amorim and Ineos are really going to be able to make their mark.
What do you think, Ben? I think it says a lot about him, actually, looking at him as an individual. Yes, there's been some criticism, and I've criticised him myself for some of the gestures that he made as a captain. But, you know, there's a lot of perhaps foreign players out with these shores do that. You can be a little bit critical of it. I was certainly a little bit critical of it. How the one thing I would never ever be critical of is his attitude to play, his desire to play, his willingness to do his best for Manchester United, and the fact that he's knocked back. Yes, that option will still be open to him in 3-4 years' time, but he could easily have taken the money and ran, and I think it says a lot about him.
Yeah, and optically as well, he played it, I think, quite expertly, because straight after there was talk about his future and Manchester United had lost that Europa League final to Spurs, Bruno Fernandes said, I'm a Manchester United player unless they, the club, want to cash out on me. So immediately set an agenda that if this was going to happen, it would be because Manchester United would take the money, would run and would reinvest in 3 or 4 other players. Then in contrast to that position, his agent spent a week last week in the Four Seasons Hotel in Riyadh, taking meetings and having advanced discussions and getting the offer to the point that it was final, so Fernandes could bring that back to his family, and now a decision has been made. So I think history will be a bit rewritten here. We'll never know how close Bruno Fernandes really was, and if it was only a football and financial decision, if he might have gone. But footballers naturally are thinking about themselves as human beings, their family, their children. And also a big point in all of this, I was told, because Fernandes, remember, had a Saudi offer last year too, was that World Cup. He didn't want to go to Saudi Arabia or outside of a top European league before the 2026 World Cup. And if you go to Saudi Arabia, even though Ivan Toney is back in the England fold at the moment, you're going from morning training to night. You're starting games at 9 p.m. You're leaving away stadiums at 1 in the morning. It can throw with your body clock, and then suddenly you're on a plane to play football for Portugal, and maybe we wouldn't be seeing the best out of Bruno Fernandes in likely his final World Cup. And I think that was a big consideration in his thinking as well.
I mean, Ben, obviously, Bruno staying, you'd imagine hastens the exit for the likes of Garnacho and Hilal. What about Marcus Rashford? Where is he going to end up?
Yeah, I think Marcus Rashford will go. There's no future at Manchester United. It's the same 40 million asking price as was the option for Aston Villa. But Villa's PSR position is tight. They can't afford those wages. Rashford, I don't think, wants to drop his package significantly. Let's see, by the way, if Jadon Sancho does the same for Chelsea. Otherwise, he'll be back at Manchester United. So Barcelona are now the favourites in the sense they want Rashford and Rashford wants Barcelona. But that was the same in January, and they weren't able to make the finances work either. So it's either going to depend on whether Manchester United bend the structure, because Barca would do a loan with an option or drop the asking price. And if not, it's 40 million. And then Barcelona either have to find that, or Rashford is once again searching for suitors. Garnacho, Chelsea and Napoli, both those suitors remain. That's pure profit on the books. So it feels like he'll depart as well. And obviously, because Garnacho wants to be a winger, has been playing more centrally under Ruben Amorim, you can argue if he goes and you get that money, you've got space to keep Bruno Fernandes, bring in Cunha, who can also be used as a forward or wide left, and still find a place for Mbeumo because he can play as a 10 or go wide right. And this is the kind of versatility, players that can play in two positions with speed and physicality that Ruben Amorim is really looking for this summer.
It does give them the problem, though, Jeff, Ben. It does give them the problem of other clubs now clearly knowing the situation they're in. They brought a couple of players in. It looks like Fernandes is going to stay, and that's great news. However, all clubs now know they are desperate to offload, right? So all of a sudden, you're now in a position where you won't get what you probably think you should get for whether it is Rashford, whether it's for Sancho, whether it's for Garnacho to a certain degree. Garnacho might be slightly different because he's probably got a higher value at this moment in time. But it does put the club in a difficult situation.
A hugely difficult situation. You're absolutely right, Ali. And then you have to think about not just the money, which is how fans are adding up these transfers, incomings, outgoings, but what's the reflection on the books for PSR? Because Rasmus Højlund, there's interest in Italy, but you're likely going to make a book loss. So it's not really in Manchester United's interest to sell him, and therefore they may have to be flexible on that one. Betis want Antony back, but they'd rather do another loan. That's not great for this financial year. Rashford, as you say, might not get 40 million if people know there's no future for him. And Barcelona don't really have that kind of money necessarily to spend. Garnacho is probably the big one because it's pure profit on the books. And I still think Manchester United feel that £60 million asking price isn't too far off what suitors are prepared to pay, because in January, Napoli were offering in the region of 50 million. So there's not a huge gulf in valuation there. So it wouldn't surprise me if Garnacho's the first one out the door, but that was the big debate over Bruno Fernandes. If you sell him, it's 100 million, and then suddenly you can do a whole revamp and bring 3 or 4 in very quickly. If he stays, then suddenly 3 or 4 players need to exit, maybe just to fund one.
Ben, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Ben.
Cheers, guys.
Big news then. Bruno Fernandes says he's staying at Manchester United. We'll take your calls on that.
talkSPORT Breakfast, waking you up Monday to Friday morning from 6 a.m. on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.